It's day 96 of 118 days with the Tudors, and today we're thinking about 1580. And this is the year that Francis Drake returns from his voyage around the world with lots of treasure for Elizabeth. So obviously this is a 3-year voyage and quite a lot happens during this time. So I've just cherry picked a few random bits to try and maybe give you a bit of an overview of the character of Drake, really, because it kind of changes a little bit throughout those 3 years. So his trip begins in 1577. It's backed by Francis Walsingham, Christopher Hatton, John Hawkins and Elizabeth herself. So if you remember the video when we looked at 1577, we talked about how these big enterprises at this point were very much being backed by personal finance rather than state finance. We've got some individuals backing this voyage. So in 1577, he's got a 150-ton ship called the Pelican, and in November of that year, he sets out on his world tour. However, it starts off quite badly. Straight away, a storm kind of stops this happening, and he has to wait until December before setting out properly. He catches up quite quickly. By the end of December, he's taken 6 Spanish and Portuguese ships, he's looted them and then set them free. So a good start in terms of treasure hunting. Now, something a bit strange happens with Drake in the next year, in 1578. He starts to become obsessed with the idea that his friend Thomas Doherty, who is manning one of the other ships, actually his enemy and needs to be gotten rid of. And he gradually over time kind of turns more and more people against him, till the point where he actually has him removed from his ship burnt, and has him tied to the mast of his own ship. Now, this is someone who he was close friends with. Eventually, he managed to convince enough people that this man is guilty of mutiny and has him beheaded. Now, according to some gossip, been written in a diary, but it's still gossip, Doherty had intimate relationships with Drake's wife. So that could be the real underlying cause of this, we don't know. Or perhaps he was mutinous, but it's a bit of a strange disintegration, I suppose, of what was a good friendship. So Doherty's gone, much to the horror of some people. Later in 1578, men that were captaining the other ships that were kind of moving with Drake and the Pelican abandoned him for various reasons, and he's left then just with the Pelican, which he renames the Golden Hind, which is probably the name of Drake's ship you're more familiar with. Here we see the next couple of years of him just looting whatever possible. So for example, in November of 1578, he tries to help himself to some treasure in the Madre de Dios mines, but he's met there with fierce resistance, quite rightly, and he actually ends up getting injured by an arrow just below his right eye. Also at that time, he's also raiding churches and warehouses and obviously other ships. His loot just grows and grows. In February of 1579, he raids a ship and is left with loads of bars of silver. Although his wealth, his treasure is growing, the number of men he's got is really dwindling. All of the battles and the sickness have reduced his crew down to 70, with only 30 of them actually able to fight if need be. We also at this point see him becoming really boastful and vain. He's dressing in really fine clothes. He's eating off silver plates that have his crest on them, claiming that they were a gift from Elizabeth. We even see him pushing his chaplain to one side and claiming he's the one that should be leading religious services. Also in this year, 1579, we see him stop at an island for provisions, where he basically dumps a woman who is pregnant, and it's claimed that she said she was made pregnant by the captain and his pirates. And that sentence alone, I think, says quite a lot about Drake and his crew. Towards the end of 1579, the ship actually becomes stuck on some rocks, and the chaplain, so the religious man on the boat, claims that God has done this as punishment for Drake killing Doherty. But actually, fairly quickly, a gale pushes the boat back off the rock. So Drake then feels vilified and is furious at the chaplain and has him has him tied up and threatens him with hanging. So Drake eventually arrives home in September of 1580. When he first lands, he's met with very official reports saying that he's a royal embarrassment and that the Spanish need to be recompensated for what he has done. However, he then receives some private messages from Elizabeth saying, "Don't worry, everything's fine." So it was all a bit of a ruse. He then has a private audience with Elizabeth where they spend the whole day looking at all of his treasure and deciding who's going to get it, essentially. And what they decide is that it would be safer to not create an inventory of this, to have no actual record of what he's brought back. That way, nobody can turn around and say, that should be mine, that should be mine. So we don't actually know exactly what he brought back, but it was definitely a lot. And she was pleased. So that secret dies with Drake and Elizabeth. And the following year, she has him knighted. So that was 1580, the return of Francis Drake with a lot of shiny, shiny things for Elizabeth. And I will see you tomorrow for 1581. See you then.